President of the Republic. President, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us here at the end of the summit of Versailles. President Michel and President von der Leyen have spoken clearly. We're in the Galerie des Batailles, and if anyone thought that war in Europe belonged to history, for the last 2 weeks we've seen that the choice by Russia under President Putin was to bring war back to Europe. In the face of this and the unheard of violence of Russia against Ukraine and its population is a tragic turning point for our history. We're all aware of the fact that it's a turning point as well for our societies, for our peoples, and for our European project. For the last 2 weeks, our response, ladies and gentlemen, this has just been said, we've responded through unity, rapidity, and a spirit of responsibility. Choices were made very quickly, all 27, with our institutions and coordinated with all of our partners in the context of NATO and G7. Diplomatic work has made it possible to isolate Russia, inter alia, recently at the General Assembly of the United Nations. For 2 weeks now, Ukrainian men and women have been fighting courageously to defend their freedom, their democracy, their sovereignty, and the integrity of their land. Europeans have a clear position, unanimous and firm condemnation of the Russian aggression at all international levels, and we've drawn full consequences of this, inter alia, with the resolution that was adopted at the General Assembly. Support to Ukraine. Together, we've agreed to deliver hardware, not just humanitarian material, but also weapons. And we've proposed today that the European facility be added to the tune of some 500 million, which is going to allow us to go further in this line. Countries that in the past were traditionally neutral, Sweden, for instance, have decided for the very first time that for the first time in decades they would take an active role in the support to Ukraine. We also have economic support, humanitarian support. This will be continued. Some 2 million refugees have been welcomed. Madam von der Leyen has referred to this, and I'd like to thank the populations of the neighboring countries, Poland, Hungary, Romania, and Moldova as well. And obviously France will be playing its role, and I would hope that we will be able to have the necessary mechanisms of solidarity that can be used in this overall approach. As of the very outset, we also deployed massive, unheard of sanctions, and this was done very quickly. Second, fourth, 6 days of conflict, they were marked by European decisions of these unprecedented sanctions. We're willing to adopt other sanctions, and all options are on the table. The point of our discussion is to prepare ourselves for these sanctions if they were able to call a halt to the attack and the aggression, and could prepare us also for the consequences in the coming weeks and months. Our initial objective is, of course, a rapid return to peace, starting with a ceasefire, followed by a rapid withdrawal of Russian troops. And that is why keeping up pressure on Russia. And we're also maintaining a very demanding dialogue, in particular in conjunction with the German Chancellor. So the support to solidarity for Ukraine is what kept us very busy, particularly yesterday. We support Ukraine today, and we will do that for as long as the war lasts. And we will be there for the reconstruction of this destruction brought about by Russia. We will be there to help it to stand up and stay standing. The message that we've sent out to the Ukrainian population is that the path to our Europe is open to them. Their fight for freedom and democracy, for the values that we all share, has demonstrated that Ukraine is indeed a member of our European family. We also want the applications made by Moldova and Georgia as well be examined in line with our treaty by the European Commission, so that the acceptability can be determined in line with the provisions of our treaty. The Versailles Declaration, the agenda of Versailles that we've been discussing today, is linked to the fact that sovereignty in Europe which might have been thought of by some as a slogan or a sort of French fantasy, is seen by all today as being crucial. This sovereignty, this strategy of independence has been there at the very start, also of the pandemic. We've seen what had to be done. It's there when we had to produce and deliver vaccines for ourselves and for other countries. We've seen it when we came out of the crisis, the start of the recovery, when we saw what was happening as regards the semiconductors, when we had delegated production to the other parts of the world, how difficult it was to return to the manufacturing of cars, for instance. And we're seeing it in the context of this crisis, where we can see how our food, our energy, our defense are all issues of sovereignty. We can cooperate. We want to be open to the world, but we want to choose our partners and not depend on any. That is what we mean by sovereignty. It's not protectionism. It's not a question of closing the door. It's a question of having the possibility of staying open without being dependent. So the Versailles agenda has set out the next few months' work along those lines. As regards defense, we want to be able to define the investments that we need. Several of us are already at the level of 2% of GDP invested in defense. Others have further efforts to make. But we're going to make coordinated efforts. We're going to identify our needs in budgetary terms. We're going to identify capabilities that are required. We'll also identify our needs when it comes to possible new conflicts, whether we're talking about shipping, maritime space, and also identify what we need in order to develop the European industrial tissue. If we're going to import more in the way of hardware from elsewhere, then there's not much point pursuing this sort of sovereignty. We need to think in terms of partnerships, yes, but we have to be able to decide to consolidate and to construct a defense industry with fewer standards, but corresponding to an integrated market.